Good evening, everyone, and thanks for joining us. My name is Lauren Abbas, and I'm the Leader Speak Series Coordinator. Our guest speaker tonight is William Penn graduate Jeremy Van Wyk. His presentation is called Serving Our Youngest Heroes, the Army National Guard Child and Youth Services Program, and will cover the unique challenges that military-connected youth face and the service program that ensures those individuals have the resources necessary to remain resilient through their adversities. Please help me welcome Jeremy Van Wyk to the stage.
All right. I think we're live now. Thank you. I appreciate everybody being out here. I know it's like the most beautiful possible day outside, so I do appreciate that. And as I was saying, it's sort of like a blast from my past. I have former 4th grade teacher here and former 6th grade teacher here, so I feel pretty honored to have them in the room with here. But yeah, we're going to go today and spend a little time talking about the National Guard Child and Youth Services Program. Some of you may be familiar with it, others it may be something new to you. This is a program that's near and dear to my heart. I was talking earlier, I've been around this youth program for about 14 years, so it's definitely something that's a passion area for me. There we go. So to get started tonight, just kind of want to do a quick little activity. So as we go through a couple of these things, if you could stand if any of these apply to you. It helps me get an idea as to who's in the audience. I think I know pretty much almost everybody here, but just to get a better idea of who's in the audience with us. So again, if any of these apply to you, if you could just stand, I would appreciate that. So please stand if you know somebody who has served in the military, anybody, neighbor, close friend. All right, perfect. Next one, please stay standing if you have a close friend who has served in the military or is currently serving. All right, we still have quite a few here. Please stand if you have a family member who has served or is currently serving. A lot of people standing up. How about if you have served or are currently serving? I thank you guys for your service. Thank you very much. It's a wonderful thing that you do. Thank you. And then please stand if you have a parent or guardian who has served or is currently serving in the military. All right. Well, this is the audience that I'm talking to right now. No, this is actually the population we work with within the youth program. We work with the military dependents who have a loved one. And I say loved one because I hate to say parent or guardian because it expands so much beyond that. Because like myself, I was not raised in a military family, but I had cousins and an uncle who served. So we talk a lot about military youth as well as military-connected youth. All right, so just a little bit, you kind of heard who I am. I feel like, again, everybody, family sitting out here, but I graduated from William Penn in 2002 with an elementary ed degree. Got fortunate and started teaching in Eddyville. Taught in my former 6th grade classroom, which was really cool. Taught there for a couple years in the Eddyville-Blakesburg Fremont School District. And then got a really random call one night over the summer from Washington, D.C., a lady asking if I would be interested in coming on board and starting to work with the youth program for the National Guard. This was totally new to me. Again, not a military kid myself, and didn't know this person, hadn't been out to D.C. forever. So I thought, sure, why not? Let's do this. So I flew out the next day, interviewed for a week out there in D.C., and then lo and behold, kind of all built to where we are now. I've also served as the lead child youth program coordinator for the Iowa National Guard. And back at that time, my responsibility was really to build the program. This was at the very beginning of the youth program era, and so Iowa had no youth program at the time. So did a lot of work to build the curriculum, plan all the activities, recruit volunteers. See a couple volunteers even here tonight that have volunteered with the youth program as well. Then moved from the Iowa position into the Western Region Assistant Program Manager spot, where I was responsible for managing all of the staff and teams west of the Mississippi River. So altogether about 50 youth coordinators in the states and territories west of the Mississippi River. And then just a little over a year ago, the opportunity presented itself to move into the national program manager position. So now my responsibilities encompass the entire 54 states and territories we have here in the country. So it's a wonderful opportunity. I've been very fortunate, very blessed to be a part of this. You'll notice on the side that it's Month of the Military Child. I'm actually wearing purple intentionally. April is Month of the Military Child, if you weren't aware of that. It's a month that's dedicated completely to recognizing our military youth for their service and sacrifice. Because when you have a parent or a loved one in the military, they serve right alongside them. Purple is the color we use. It's really a joint color. I don't know how they get it, because when you look at like the Army, they're green, the Air Force is blue, you've got the Navy. But in somebody's mind, when you combine all the colors, it's purple. So we just jointly, we wear purple to show our support. And what's really cool, they use the dandelion as a representative of the National Guard or military youth in general. It may seem kind of crazy because we think of the dandelion as being a weed. But what they say is that it's indicative of what military youth are like because they can be resilient in almost any environment. And when you think of the dandelion, that holds pretty true if anybody's a gardener out there. So just real quickly, some of what I'm responsible for. I kind of talked a little bit about this, but I'm responsible for the day-to-day operations of the Child and Youth Services program. So again, working with just over 100 full-time National Guard Child and Youth Program coordinators across the 54 states and territories. And what we like to talk about as well is we also span 10 time zones. And so that's a lot of what I do is working with them on the personnel side on a day-to-day basis. Everything from hiring, onboarding, providing the training and the support, managing and looking at the budgets. We receive budgets from the government for travel to support getting people out to do events, as well as just the money that's involved for the contract of pay, benefits, and everything like that for all of the youth coordinators. So responsible for tracking all of that, and then of course what the government pays attention to, making sure all of the contract requirements are met on time. And there's always a big list of them, quite a few out there. But I say that, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention that I actually am very fortunate to work with an amazing team of youth people out there, youth professionals, both on the regional level with our program management team, our program analyst that works out of National Guard Bureau in Washington, D.C., as well as all of the youth coordinators that are across the country. Tremendous team of professionals, and none of this would be possible if it weren't for all of them. So while I may be the one up here, really truthfully, they should be the people up here presenting to all of you tonight. So just a little bit about the background of the youth program itself. You kind of heard me mention, back in 2004, there was no National Guard youth program. On the active duty side, they had installations where they ran child development centers, and so their populations were very concentrated around the installation. After September 11th, when we started to deploy National Guard soldiers at an ever-increasing rate, the National Guard realized that we needed to do something for the youth that were out there. They were experiencing a lot of the challenges that active duty youth were experiencing, but there were no support networks for them. So that was sort of back in 2004 when this whole idea kind of came about. And then in 2005 was really when we started onboarding youth coordinators in the states. In 2005, we actually only had one youth coordinator per state or territory. And then that was when I came on board in Iowa, and you had the responsibility of running the program for the entire state at the time. Since then, back in 2012, National Guard Bureau put out a national youth contract. And really the purpose of the contract was to standardize the services across the 54 states and territories. What we found prior to that was states were running some amazing programs, but when you went from one state to the next, the services differed a little bit. So by doing a national contract, it helped standardize the services that were being made available to the families out there. And the other great thing it did is it expanded the number of staff we had. So in some states, they went from being one person to two. And I know that may not seem like a lot, but when you're trying to run across an entire state, having two is better than one. And then in some of the states like California, Texas, because of the geographic size and population, they actually expanded to have 3 youth coordinators. So that's kind of where we've evolved over the years with the youth program. I know this is talking about leadership, and I was asking my mom all the time, like, what am I supposed to talk about? What do I focus on here? And she talked about, how you guys work together to build this program. And so we kind of, if you look at the slide here, really we started with a concept. As I mentioned, we knew there were needs out there, but we didn't know exactly what the needs were. What challenges were our military youth facing in the National Guard population? You look at a state like Iowa, we have military youth and families in all 99 counties. But what are the unique needs or challenges that they were facing? So we had to kind of get this concept and wrap our brains around it just a little bit. And then with everything, especially when those coming out of the education field, there are policies and guidance that go with everything you're going to do working with children. But again, the challenge being all of the guidance was written for active duty installations. Nothing was written for the National Guard. So there was a process of having to write all the policies to get those put in place, get them staffed, reviewed, and get them approved by leadership. Then the curriculum. So, hey, we've got a program. We know we need to work on these skills. What curriculum we're going to use? And at the time, there was nothing. Since then, we've been fortunate to train a lot of our youth coordinators in the curriculum like 7 Habits of Highly Effective Teens. Right now, the big push is the Master Resiliency Training that the military offers. It's a 14-module program that kids between 11 and 18 go through, and it's really designed to equip them with all the skills they may need to be resilient in the face of really any sort of adversity, not just military-related adversity. So then we looked at hiring the staff. Once we had the foundational stuff in place, we had to get staff hired. This was a part I wasn't really highly involved with at the time. But again, the challenge was we didn't even really know what skill sets we were looking for in the staff to bring on board. Were we bringing on teachers because we wanted them to work with the kids in that capacity? Were we bringing on physical ed rec majors because we needed them to get out and do programming with kids? We really didn't know. And there'll be a slide here in a second. You'll kind of see how we break down within the backgrounds of the youth program. And then right now, what's been a big focus of the last couple of years is looking at the metrics for impact. All this money is getting funneled into the youth program. I shouldn't say all this money because they're recording right now. But money is getting funded in to support the youth program, and obviously you need to show impact of what it's supporting. For us, it really is looking at the impact we are having on the soldier, him or herself. While we know we're positively impacting the lives of kids by what we're doing, money is money, and we also know we have to look at how is what we're doing with the kids helping prepare the soldier to be ready to deploy, be mission ready at all times. And so that's kind of what we're working on right now. And then we're just in a constant state of new curriculum, building new skills in kids. Definitely, we saw after September 11th a huge uptick in the deployments that were happening. Then we get after 2010, 2011, deployments started to come down just a little bit. But we were in a different phase. Before, from 2001 through probably 2006, 2007, it was all about preparing kids for separation. Now we're working at preparing kids for reintegration. It's a whole different mindset to focus on. How do you bring the family back together after they've been apart for so long? So the purpose and mission, and I'm just going to hit these real quickly. Our mission is really to make sure the kids have the skills that they need to be successful, to be resilient out there. The purpose of the program is really to break down the conflict, and we say the word conflict, for the soldier, because the soldier, him or herself, is torn oftentimes. They have the commitment to the military and they have their commitment to the family. And when we talk to the soldiers, they'll say all the time, I'm fine. I'll deploy, I'll be fine over there, I'm trained. My family is who I'm most worried about. And so if we can step in and provide the support and the training in any way whatsoever, then again, we allow that soldier to be ready for their mission. We have goals, everything from educating, providing the skill development. What we really are focusing on are opportunities to bring kids together. For years within the youth program, we really shied away from the benefit of helping kids build relationships with each other, positive peer relationships. I don't know why. I think because it was viewed so much as, well, when kids get together, they just have fun. They're not learning anything. And so that's how people viewed it. Well, you're just a fun activity. And they weren't seeing the skill benefit side of it. So we kind of shied away from that. But in the last few years, we really have stepped up showing, because research is now out there to back this up, that youth are resilient because primarily the positive relationships they have with other peers, but also with adults. And so that's really what we've been striving to work toward, is just giving those opportunities. Like I said, in Iowa, when you have military kids in 99 different counties, any opportunity to bring them together is what we're really striving for. And then the outreach component, huge, especially again in the National Guard community, because we are so geographically dispersed. And that's a term we use a lot within the National Guard, geographically dispersed, geodispersed, because you may have a community where there's only one military family, and they may not feel connected to any other military families out there. They may not know where to go for resources and support. And so a lot of what we're focusing on is getting out into these communities and educating all the community members, Chamber of Commerce's, Boys and Girls Clubs, 4-H, you name it, trying to get out there, get in front of them and train them on just some basics of the military so they know sort of the lingo just a little bit, talking with families, but also what they can do to help support military kids. So the youth program itself is broken down into 10 regions, and we really operate on a regional sort of concept here. Again, I don't know how these were broken up. These are FEMA regions, because to this day, I'm still struggling to figure out how Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands are in the same region as New York and New Jersey. Doesn't really make too much sense to me, but I'm sure somebody had a reason for it. So this is really how we operate. And within each region, there's a youth coordinator who serves as sort of a regional delegate. And what their job is to work with the youth coordinators in their region, find out what issues youth are facing, what challenges are out there, what resources are needed, and to bring those up to the national level so that we can act on them and try and figure out what supports and resources we can put together. What's also cool is we don't just have a youth coordinator delegate from each region. We have a teen that serves on a National Guard teen panel, and each region has a Guard teen delegate, and they do the same thing, only they're focused on hearing from the youth themselves and talking with their peers and what challenges those kids are facing. And they bring them up to the national level so that we can really work to enact change if we need to, or get some resources out there across the states or the territories. And it's really been cool. We've seen a lot of positive growth from this. The resiliency training I was talking about a little while ago actually stems from the feedback we got out of the field here, because they were seeing this on the active duty side, and the youth were being more resilient overall. And the National Guard looked at this and said, we need to get in on this. And that came from youth saying, I just don't feel like I have the skills to be resilient when I face a challenge or something happens in my life. So it's been a great concept, and to my knowledge, this is how we're going to continue to sort of align with everything here. So the youth coordinators, these are the individuals that I work with on a day-to-day basis. I know it's a little hard to see, but each of those boxes represents one of the youth coordinators I have out in the field working right now. As you can see, they're sort of broken down in some states with 2, some states with 3, and some of the smaller states up in the New England area, we just have a single youth coordinator. So these are the people, like I said, should be up here right now presenting, because they do the heavy lifting. These people are the face of the program. They make it what it is. And they're just a tremendous team to get to work with every day. So just breaking down a little bit how we align here from backgrounds, you can kind of see in the pie chart there, this is where we've settled in the skill sets that we really find to be successful in the youth program. People coming out of the social sciences, the education field, business program management, and then, like I said, the recreation, exercise science departments as well. Again, a highly qualified team. You can see over the side there, 97% of our youth coordinators hold at least bachelor's degrees out there. So these are, again, are really skilled individuals working with the kids all the time. Just because I've mentioned Iowa and we're in Iowa, I felt the need to show this. This is a population map that shows military dependents by zip code. And I just want to put it up here to point out again, there are very few areas in the state not shaded in to some degree. So these are all your military dependents around the state of Iowa by zip code. You can kind of see how it's concentrated. And I think it's just important to always refer to this and keep this in mind, because we may think we don't have military youth in our schools or in our communities, but the chance is pretty high that we do have the military kids there. So real quickly by the numbers, then we'll get to some of the what we do actually in supporting the kids here. These are the numbers over the last 6 years we've had the national contract, and we're really proud of these numbers. If you look at the total youth and adults served, we're over 1 million right now. And that's pretty amazing when we're looking at having to find families. And actually, I say find families, literally go out in some cases and find them where they live and try and get them involved in the program itself. What's really cool is we've utilized almost 46,000 volunteers over the last 6 years. And put on almost 15,500 different events for kids around the country. And like I said, I've got a couple volunteers actually sitting in the room here. I've been fortunate. Actually, the William Penn population, the student population, has been tremendous. When I was running the Iowa program, the bulk of my volunteers were actually William Penn students. So I've been very fortunate over the years to work with some great students out of William Penn. So how do we provide the support? It really breaks down into 4 key areas. You've got the skill development area, the outreach, resource and referral, and volunteer support. So skill development area, this is what we do on a regular basis, going out and doing everything from deployment events for kids, residential camps for kids, weekend retreats, overnight different events, things like that. Anytime we can bring the kids together and teach them life skills that they'll find and use later on in life. We're not always just in this mindset of preparing them to have a deployment, but just what are some skills that they can use later in life and be successful. Right now, a big focus has really been on preparing youth for college and career. That's been a big push for us within the program, because we found that a lot of youth in general were reaching the junior, senior year of high school and not sure how to complete a college application, not sure how to write a college essay, not sure how to apply for financial aid. And so a lot of what we've done the last couple of years is really tried to put events together to help kids get prepared for college or career. The outreach I talked about just a little bit. Beyond even community members, really going out and doing in-service trainings for schools. That was a big initiative I had when I was in the state of Iowa, was trying to get out to schools as much as possible and try and teach educators because they're really our first line of defense in helping connect youth with resources. Resource and referral is a little bit different. This is anytime a family member would call us and say, hey, my child's really struggling in school. Do you have any resources available? And our youth coordinators field those calls, and they're able, we usually try within a 24-hour window to get the support back to the family if we can. Like I said, anything from academic support to, in some cases, it'll be calls about childcare. You know, my spouse is deployed, I'm going to start working out of the home, and I need to find childcare. Is there anything out there you can help me with to try and find childcare? So those are what we deal with on a day-to-day basis, phone calls, emails, things like that. And then the volunteer support. Again, when you're 1, 2, or 3 people in an entire state, you can't do it by yourself. And especially in some of these events, our summer camps, you'll have some states where they have almost 200 kids at a summer camp for a week. So obviously they're not doing that by themselves. So we rely a lot on the volunteers out there. So skill development. One of the things that people originally the youth program thought were we were just babysitters. And that was a hard thing for us to break down. We had to break through those walls. But it's so much more than that. These are some pictures up there, some different events we have going on. But really, again, anytime we bring the kids together to work on any sort of skills, we do camps. We've had states do music camp, fishing camps, horseback riding camps. And they've infused within these all sorts of different life skills and resiliency skills. We do day camps, everything again from the college career preparation to even, you can see in the picture there, just even basic auto care, helping kids just get the basic skills. How do you change a tire? How do you change the oil in your car? Check the oil in your car. It may seem a little crazy, but again, the research is out there saying that some kids are just not getting exposed to these skills growing up. We're really big into the STEM initiative, or STEAM. I know that's a big push here in the state of Iowa as well. And so anything we can do to engage kids in the sciences and mathematics is definitely something we're working on. You can see over here, there's a program out there, it's called Rad Kids. It's not a military program, but we've really started to embrace it. And it's a program that comes in and they teach families, the kids, how to be safe. If a stranger approaches you, what action should you take? And it's all about preparing kids and equipping them with those skills so that, obviously the fear is abduction, kidnapping, things like that. And what they come in, they work with the parents, they work with the kids. So if you're walking home from school and somebody approaches you, what do you do in those situations? And that's been a big success. They've piloted originally in Alaska, and now it's spreading out to some other states out there in the country as well. We have different clubs that the kids come together. We've got everything from gardening clubs to sewing clubs, cooking clubs, all kinds of stuff that the youth coordinators run on a pretty regular basis out there. So it's kind of fun to see those. And then anytime we can engage the kids in community service. Obviously, they're growing up in families that are service-oriented if they have a loved one serving in the military. So we just want to embrace that and get the kids involved at the community level as well. Some other things, you can see a couple of the pictures there. We also work really hard with the kids in skills related to safety. We'll do events for kids, teaching them first aid and CPR. So that way if they're home by themselves or if they're with somebody that gets injured, they know exactly what to do in those emergency situations, which has been very successful for us. Especially going into the summer when you have a lot of kids home from school and some may be unsupervised. Equipping the kids with these skills has been very important for us. Again, the college and career, and then probably what we're known most for within the youth program is the work we do throughout the deployment cycle and supporting families. We do programming for kids before, during, and after a deployment. So before a deployment, it's all about helping kids work on the coping skills, dealing with stress, improving their communication so that they're able to talk with people and communicate how they're feeling and what they're feeling. And then throughout the deployment, what are things they can do to remain resilient throughout a deployment? And then, like I mentioned, on the backside, the reunion, the reintegration side, what we can do to help bring those families back together again. Because I always think if there was a unit when I was in Iowa, there was a unit that deployed. Originally supposed to be a year-long deployment. They got over there, and just right before they were supposed to come home, they got extended again. And so here are the families thinking, my loved one's about ready to come home. And altogether, from the time they left until they actually came home, it was just shy of about a 2-year period. So you can imagine if you have kids, that's a lot of relationship time that's been missed. So what can we do to build those relationships back together again? The outreach, I kind of talked about this already, but again, anything we can do to get out into communities. You see the picture on the side over there is from an Iowa school for Purple Up Day. They got all the staff involved in getting the training and everything there. And then going out into communities, working with the Red Cross, things like that as well. Resource and referrals. I just put this slide on here because what I wanted to point out was, on average in a year, our youth coordinators field right around 65,000 resource and referral calls, emails, people walking into their office around the country. So again, these are not necessarily things where it's super labor intensive. It may just be, hey, do you have any events coming up? Can I get my kid registered? Something as simple as that. But there are the cases where, again, struggling with academics, maybe child care assistance, and even sometimes referring kids to get mental health services if need be. And then the volunteer support. And what I love about this slide, again, none of this would be possible if it weren't for the volunteers that come into the program. And over the last 6 years of the program, what's amazing is if you factor in the number of hours volunteers have contributed to the youth program as a whole, based on the Department of Labor statistics, that's almost $20 million of time donated on behalf of military youth by volunteers. So that's a number we're very proud of, and definitely hoping it continues to keep that trend going forward. So why do we do what we do? We know for a fact, because there's research out there, that military families, and especially in the face of deployment, there are greater tendencies for child maltreatment out there. Youth are more likely to experience stress. Youth are more likely to experience anxiety. You can see some of the statistics there. 18% more likely to be diagnosed with a behavioral disorder as a result of a deployment, and 19% at least a stress disorder, some sort of major stress disorder, whether it be diagnosed high stress, whether it be suicidal thoughts, tendencies, or actions. So those are the things we're definitely working with, and that's why a lot of those programs we talked about just now, that's why we do a lot of this stuff. But it's not just about when a service member is deployed. There's also impacts when they're in what we refer to as a steady state sort of cycle, which means they're not getting ready for deployment, they're home, things have kind of evened out just a little bit. It's really what we refer to as a steady state. And again, what the research shows is that youth feel isolated out there. And a lot of that with the National Guard side, what we struggle with is youth don't identify themselves as military kids, because their mom or dad or their loved one, unless they're deployed, they go to work every day, they come home, they live in the community, they go to school, so they don't necessarily identify as a military kid. But then when a deployment happens, they're put in a whole new environment and a whole new situation that they have to cope with, and they feel isolated because a lot of their peers just don't understand what they're going through. And there's a story that one of the youth coordinators told me one time, and it goes to this military-civilian knowledge gap. And I always point this out because it isn't done in any ill intention whatsoever, but it does illustrate what we do to get out there and create the awareness of what military families face. And it was two neighbors living side by side. One of them a military family, the husband was deployed, had been gone, I think, about 9 months at that time. And the neighbor, with all good intentions, came over and started talking to the wife, and just said, I know what you're going through. My husband travels for work. Didn't mean any ill will by it, was just trying to build that connection, but there's obviously a gap there. Having a spouse that travels for work is a lot different than having a spouse that's deployed overseas. And so again, it's that knowledge that we're trying to build, that understanding out there, that common language, so that everybody understands kind of what's going on there. So challenges of military life, and you can see there are quite a few here listed. Some of the big ones, obviously decreased communication depending on where the service member may be stationed, especially overseas. We have some service members who are fortunate they're stationed on a base where they have access to internet services. So Skype, Facebook, email, they can almost do on a regular basis every day. But then we have some places where they get deployed, and it may be 3 weeks where they have no Wi-Fi access, internet access. So obviously there's a decrease in communication, which results in increased anxiety, increased stress, increased worry and fear out there. And then again, the stressed peer-to-peer relationships, because a lot of the civilian youth just don't understand what the military kids are going through. And one day they may go to school and their friend is super happy because they got a phone call from mom or dad, or they got an email. And then 2 days after that, they may be really upset or sad because they haven't heard anything from mom or dad for a couple days. And so it's trying to get used to those emotions up and down. That can be really difficult, especially when you're talking about young children, adolescents. And then the reintegration side, and actually what a lot of families tell us is the greater challenge is not in preparing for the deployment, it's in the reintegration aspect of it. In the deployment side, everybody sort of gets mission focused. The soldier's working on what he or she needs to get ready for. The family knows this is the timeline we're under, this is when they leave, this is when they're going to come back. So it's almost easier to get prepared for that. You can almost get into sort of a mechanical mode. But what happens, they say, is when integration happens, again, like I mentioned before, it could be a full year of separation. And how do you start reestablishing that communication? How do you start rebuilding those connections? We've had service members deployed that leave as, a newly married couple, and they come home and they've got a baby now. And how do you start to build those connections back again? So that can be a big challenge on the reintegration side. The emotional distance, because kids tend to be a little bit leery. Here's somebody that's kind of new to me again, and I've got to get comfortable with this individual. And what's also challenging is sometimes the service members will come home with lasting effects of the deployment. Sometimes you can see those if they've been injured, but especially in the last 10 years, there's been a big focus on post-traumatic stress disorder and traumatic brain injury, and those are things you can't see. And so for a young kid, their parent or loved one may be experiencing those and may be angry or distant, and they don't understand it because obviously they're not able to comprehend what post-traumatic stress disorder is. And so that can be very difficult as well. And then the academic impact on the reintegration side. Obviously the youth are in school when the service member deploys. They go oftentimes to the send-off ceremonies. But when they come home, they want to try and be with that person again. And so there's a conflict there between, wanting to build the time with my loved one, but also I have to still go to school. And this is why I really stress with educators and administrators to be flexible as much as you can. I realize there's accountability out there with youth and education. But I know I've been in schools where the kid wanted to be out of school for 2 days because their dad was coming home, and the school considered it an unexcused absence. And we're going to withhold their final grades because of it. So again, I realize there are policies out there, but as much as we can be flexible and understanding, that's what we ask for in working with military youth. So how can people help? This is always the question. How can I help? You can see again, there's a lot of stuff out there. Everything from just increasing the knowledge of the military so that you're able to build those connections. Again, we have youth coordinators in all the states and territories, and they love coming in and talking at community organizations, coming in and working in schools. When I was in Iowa, I know I came down to Penn and taught, or didn't teach, but presented at a couple pre-service educator classes, did that in a few colleges as well. So that's one of the big things. The other thing is just really being an advocate for military kids. So, that situation with the school, if you're the parent and you know what this family is going through and you know what this youth is struggling with, trying to be that advocate for the kid. So that way they're not feeling that conflict of, well, I want to be with my loved one, but at the same time, I don't want to have unexcused absences and those sorts of things. Because I know in some schools, they even go as far as, if you go the whole semester with an unexcused absence, you don't have to take your final semester tests and things like that. And so again, as a kid struggling with what do I do in these situations? And then just become familiar with the resources that are available. We'll talk a little bit about those in just a second. There are a ton of resources out there. We actually have a mobile app that we have with the youth program that anybody can download. It's free. And what's great is a lot of the resources are applicable to military and civilian youth. So you don't have to just be working with military kids to use it. All right, so as we kind of pull this all together here just a little bit, this is kind of the fun part. Again, talking with Mom and asking her, what do I talk about? She goes, tie in your William Penn experience here into what you're doing. And really truthfully, I was very fortunate going to William Penn. First and foremost, because I had professors who were super caring and dedicated, and they challenged you every single day. And I cannot thank them enough for doing that, because in this job, every day is a challenge, because every day is something new. So just that access to those professors that were there to support us and challenge us along the way. The other thing I really can't thank William Penn enough for is the appreciation I had for diversity by coming through William Penn. Obviously, I grew up outside of Oskaloosa in a small farm town. Not a lot of diversity in those areas. Coming to Penn, it just really sort of opened my mind to everything. And it really applies to what I do now, because we're working with populations from the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, to the Polynesian population and cultures of Guam and Hawaii, up to the Inuit populations in Alaska. So we're working with all sorts of diverse populations out there. So that is definitely something I walked away from Penn with and am very fortunate about. And then the other one I'm going to kind of talk a little bit here is the leadership approach. And this is something I've continued to work on over the years. I'm definitely not like a John Maxwell or a Stephen Covey or any of those people that are published authors with leadership, but one of the seeds that got planted with Penn, and it's something I use to this day, is to start thinking about the type of leader you want to be. And that was from day one, I think, intro to ed class, Pam, if I remember correctly. Just, what side of leader? Because when you're in the classroom, you are a leader. You've got these minds in your classroom, and you're shaping these minds every single day. So you're leader no matter what sort of environment you find yourself on. So this is kind of taken on some different spins here, but I always come back to thinking of leadership as being somebody who's very humble. And because it's the military and you can't have a word without having acronyms and everything to go with it, I started looking at what it means to be a humble leader and to be an effective leader. And again, I'm not a published author here, so I'm sure everybody has a thought on this. But these are some of the things I definitely hold to every single day. First one being honesty. What I do now is working more on the personnel side, so you have to have those difficult conversations with people sometimes on a daily basis, which aren't great. Especially in our contract world, things change on a daily basis. And so just having that open conversation with everybody so they know you're not holding anything back, you're not hiding anything. Being understanding, this is, again, a big one. Our youth coordinators are out there giving up evenings, giving up holidays, giving up weekends on a regular basis in support of the military kids. So if something comes up within their family, it's just critical to be understanding of what their situations are. Motivating, this is one right now that's really been a hard one for us over the last year. We typically work on a year-to-year contract, but this last year we were hit with a 3-month contract and a 9-month contract and a 3-month contract. So to try and keep people motivated and continue to really be passionate about what they're doing when, well, I have a job until July at this point, how do you do that and how do you keep people going on a regular basis? Being bold, confronting issues, taking on challenges, being confident to say yes when opportunity presents itself. Like I said, back in 2004, having finished my second year of teaching and then get a random phone call to fly out to DC and interview, saying yes to those sort of situations, because if it hadn't been for that, then I wouldn't be where I am today working within the youth program itself. And then being a learner, this is what I've jokingly referring to as my Hudson News habit. I don't know. Anybody who knows me knows when I travel, I have some sort of professional book with me that I'm reading at all times. And what you notice is when you go through the airports, they always have a Hudson newsstand. And you will always find me, if I have any time in an airport, standing in the area where you've got the leadership development books, youth development books, those sorts of things, always picking one up, reading it, taking it with me. So it's something that we try to definitely impart on our youth coordinators as well, so that they remain sort of on the cutting edge of what the latest research trends are in youth development and youth programming. And then the empowering thing, just always realizing that whatever program you work in, whatever you're doing, it's bigger than you are. And people will come and go into programs. So when I leave the program, that we've empowered the people to step up and take on those leadership roles as well. Again, I know I've said this a few times, a tremendous team, and it would not be possible without that team I work with. So just, what keeps us going just a little bit in the youth program in general, when we're faced with, okay, you have a job until July, is really the feedback from the parents and the kids. And these are just a couple things we pulled off, but when you're getting comments back from families like, because my kid was at this event or because my kid was a part of this program, you've forever changed their life. You've turned them around. My kid was getting bullied at school, never wanted to go to school, didn't have friends at school. But by going through the program, they learned how to communicate better. They learned how to build relationships with others. And so those are the things that really keep us going on a day-to-day basis. And it's not just even the family members and the kids. We also hear from a lot of the commanders and the soldiers out there that, because my soldiers have kids in this program, the kids understand what the soldier is doing. The soldier is ready to focus on their mission, and it just helps us be a ready force across the board. All right, so you can kind of see some of the things that keep me connected here. A few of them I love. I just love the fact that there are no 2 days that are ever the same. Every day is different. In fact, today I had a whole list of to-dos, and none of them got done. So it's just every day changes just a little bit. And then I really, this is a way to give back for me personally to the military kids and their families. I wasn't in the military, and so working as a contractor is an opportunity for me to give back in some way to those youth. They're pretty amazing. You can see they're the military kids, the last bullet point there. One of the best groups of youth I've ever worked with. We were joking earlier that they will show up and walk into an event, and within 5 minutes, they're best friends with everybody in the room because they're just so used to having to build those connections with people. Now, I have a video. We're going to cross our fingers that the video plays. It's got 2 songs, but again, it just gives a little bit better idea as to the different types of programs we do within the youth program itself. that gives you a little bit of an idea as to the diversity of programs we run around the country with all the kids here. And then just a few resources here to kind of wrap up. Like I said, we have a mobile app. If you haven't downloaded it, it would be great if you would download it. But once you get on the app, it will provide you with everything, the contact information for your local youth coordinators, the social media sites for all of the youth programs around the country, as well as resources specifically for educators in a section, tough topic resources, as well as just general resources for youth and for families out there. So if you go to the App Store, Google Play, and just search ARNGCYS, then it should be able to pull up and you should be able to download it. I've been encouraging a lot of teachers to do it because there is a whole section on educator resources and things out there. The National Child and Youth Services website, you can see the link there. And I would be really remiss, since we're in Iowa, if I didn't provide the contact information for the lead coordinator here in the state. His name is Chris Cox. Phenomenal guy, wonderful. We're very fortunate to have him on our team here. But there's his contact information. If you're interested in ever volunteering, I know we're always looking for volunteers. If you've got questions about maybe you have a youth in your school or in your community that has a military connection, you want to know maybe what she can do to help support him or her, Chris is definitely a great resource here within the state. All right, any questions? I'm so used to usually doing this over a conference call for our youth coordinator training every month, so having an actual audience is a whole new thing for me, but any questions that I could answer at this point? Yes, sir. What was that? I'm sorry. The symposiums. That's a good question. The youth symposiums are now, they used to be open to all kids, and I'm looking at Mrs. Sheasley right here because she had some fun times at the youth symposiums. They're weekend event, so the youth show up on a Friday evening, they're there all day Saturday, and then they leave usually around noon on Sunday. During that time, they may be with their parents part of it, they may not be. But what it really is focused on is working with the youth and teaching them how to develop their leadership skills. So they oftentimes will do some community service project in some capacity, but really it's getting them to work on communicating, team building, coming together. And so it's a concerted effort now really just among the teen population. Back when I was in Iowa, we had youth attending from kindergarten up to 12th grade, but now it's really focused on the middle school, high school age group, and it really is the Master Resilience Training that I mentioned earlier, the 14 modules, a lot of that is presented at these youth symposiums as well. Other questions? Yes? Really putting the pieces together still sort of boggles my mind just a little bit. But back in 2004, like I said, I'd finished the second year of teaching at Eddyville. Was all primed and set to go back for my third year, was ready to go. My aunt at the time, who had also taught at Eddyville, her husband was in the Iowa National Guard. She'd been a longtime volunteer in the state of Iowa working with the National Guard families. And so she actually had been working for this company in DC for the National Guard to build some support programs for family members, so the spouses, significant others. And then apparently when the conversation started that we need to start a youth version of all of this, for some reason she recommended me, I don't know, or somehow there was a connection there. So I have my aunt to thank for that. But she did, she mentioned my name, and then, yeah, they called one night completely out of the blue. I almost didn't even answer the phone call, and just said, your name was given to us. We know you have a little bit of a teaching background. Would you be interested in flying out here, interviewing for a week, and possibly start working on developing this? So, yeah, I guess I have Aunt Sandra to really thank for kind of opening the door in that direction. Other questions? Yes, sir. No, the National Guard is specific to the Army and the Air Force. Correct. Oh, this is always the fun part. This is where we have a hard time. The challenge for us is that our funding is strictly green, or what we refer to as green. And that means all of our funding for the youth program comes from the Army side. So their preference, obviously, if it's their money, we're working with Army National Guard youth. But there are through partnerships, and this is why partnerships are so critical to the youth program itself, because we're able to offer camping opportunities, programming opportunities, things like that through partnerships so that we're able to support the Air Force. When we do our reports every month, and in fact, I brought a couple copies here. These are actually our annual reports we submit. Not this physical one, but one of this year was at the White House with Michelle Obama. She actually reviewed all of this to look at what we do within the youth program. We do support other service components. It's just our funding is tied specifically to the Army side. It actually works in a lot of different varieties of ways. In some cases, in states, they'll partner with 4-H, for instance, and 4-H will say, we'll offer you or we'll save you 15 camping slots. And then we just find the 15 kids to go into that camp. And it's essentially a 4-H camp, but we show up and do some activities with the kids just to add a military component. In some situations, they'll partner with a camping facility like the YMCA, and they'll say, we just want to rent out your entire facility. We're going to bring our own kids in. We're going to bring our own support staff in. We just need to utilize your facility. So it kind of runs the gamut there as to how that partnership looks. Other questions? Yes, sir. Mm-hmm. That's a loaded question. With regard to preparing kids, we do, as part of the pre-deployment events and programming that we do, we don't specifically name it as preparing for post-traumatic stress disorder and things like that, but we work with the kids more specifically on change and approach it from the aspect of, think of yourself a year ago. What did you like? What were you interested in? What did you look like? And how much you've changed over a year. And then we kind of translate that into the service member. They may be gone for a year. So think of some of the changes he or she may go through. So we try to do it that way so it breaks it down a little bit more so they understand the concept of change just a little bit. Now, in the situations where a service member may come back with post-traumatic stress disorder or a traumatic brain injury, what's been amazing in the last 10 years or so is not only has the youth program really flourished and taken off, but there are a lot of other programs out there that have now started. We have a survivor outreach program, and we have the Yellow Ribbon program. We have family readiness assistance. And so what's great is all of those teams come together and they work with the whole family when it's a situation like post-traumatic stress disorder. From the kids' side, some of the stuff we do work with the youth on is communicating, because again, if the parent is seeming distant, or in some cases the service member may be angry or agitated or on edge all the time. So it's helping the youth sort of understand how to communicate that stuff so it's not as scary of a concept. But really in those situations, we work a lot more on the adult side and how we can work with the service member, the spouse, the significant other, and help them have the conversations with the kids at home. And that we found that is probably the best way and the most successful way for us to handle it, is approaching it working with the family collectively, than just trying to work with some of the kids individually, those sorts of things. What we do as well is, in those situations, obviously there are some unique stressors that come with that. So again, getting out and working with the school, especially working with the teachers of those kids, so the teachers also understand what post-traumatic stress disorder is. They understand what a traumatic brain injury is, so they know also how to better communicate with the family. Because one of the things we hear is there can be too much information and it can be hard to process that at times. So, just anything you can do to break things down and communicate things in smaller chunks of information and things like that. So those are some of the strategies we've found to be successful. Any other questions? Yes, sir. We do in some situations. I feel like I'm just giving the political answer here. We do one sometimes. The reason it has been sort of kept separated is because of states specifically like Iowa, where we don't have active duty installations or components focused here. There are quite a few states when you start looking at it that don't have an active duty installation. For Iowa, closest would be Rock Island Arsenal in the Mississippi River or Offutt Air Force Base in Nebraska. And so the challenge in just trying to group the National Guard youth in with the active duty is, one, it's just the logistics of it. How do we connect those families when they're so far away from any of those services? The other thing is even between the National Guard and the active duty side, there's a knowledge gap. And I don't say that to be mean in any way whatsoever, but a lot of times, you know, in talking with active duty families, they don't even fully understand what National Guard families go through, because to them, the military is life 100% of the time, every day, all day long. Whereas on the National Guard, like I mentioned earlier, mom or dad may go to work all the time and may not deploy or have to go to training or something like that. So there's a knowledge gap there that still exists between the Army side and the National Guard side that we're working to break down. But that's another reason why grouping them all together, we found that the youth may not get as intensive support that's as tailored to what their unique needs are for the National Guard kids. Any other questions? What was that? Like I said, I have the utmost respect for all of our service members, and this is just a way for me to feel like I can give back in some small way for what they do. But no, the military is not necessarily for me to actually enlist in the military. I will admit that. I prefer more to work with the youth on the kids' side and work with the families. Yes. I should have you guys answer. You guys are the volunteers. I didn't pay mom to say that, but yes. No, some of the things, you know, with regard to volunteers, we've actually hired some William Penn students that have started out as volunteers. We've hired them as youth coordinators in the past, so it's a great way if they're interested in working with that population, a great way to get your foot in the door. Not a lot of opportunities out there when you look at states, they only have one position open in the entire state. So sometimes you have to be flexible and willing to relocate. But also, you know, a lot of the volunteers get skills that help build resumes and things like that. I know one of the volunteers I'm thinking about from Penn is now a principal down in one of the schools here in Southeast Iowa. And what's great is he took a lot of what he gained in getting to work so closely with the military kids, and now when I look at what he's doing in his school building, he's having all sorts of military pride things happening. He's having military speakers come in on a regular basis and talk with the kids. So, you know, it's something I think from a career perspective has helped some volunteers, at least I hope so anyway. Any other questions? All right, well, I appreciate everybody being here tonight. Thank you very much. I do have, in case you're interested, a couple handouts up here, some resource listings, the different resources that are available, as well as my business card in case you have any questions after you leave here. So, but no, thank you for being here. I know it's a beautiful night out, so go and enjoy your evening.